The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha everyone, I'm geologist Philip Ong, here with Mr. Dane DuPont of HawaiiTracker.com, bringing you guys another Hawaiian Volcano Tracker update. Today is Wednesday, January 25th, 2023. How's it going with you today, Dane? Oh, sorry, I didn't give you enough time to turn your mic on?
Oh, yeah, sorry, we were having a little bit of a lag spike there as well, it looks like. Hopefully everything's being settled in. But yeah, we've been pretty busy this month with all the volcano awareness presentations from the USGS and the After Dark in the Park as well. So also we have an eruption going on. So we'll be recapping a little bit of the latest action and some of the presentations, as just talking about them as well.
Yeah, sounds good, yeah. What you guys are hopefully seeing here is a live feed from the USGS of the eruption Kīlauea currently ongoing. Mauna Loa is still quiet. So only minor changes in Kīlauea, we'll recap them here today. It's been the story of the crater floor continuing to rise and bulge upwards. It's been a few weeks now, so the picture's a little clearer. We'll show you guys that. And as Dane said, try to recap a little bit of the monitoring and the talks and the context of everything that's going on here. So we won't talk too much Mauna Loa today. There was an excellent stream from Two Pineapples last night with USGS Volcano Awareness Month on Mauna Loa. So if you want to know more about Mauna Loa, go listen to that. Otherwise, we'll pick back up when we have a little more. We'll kind of cover a little bit at the end, but there's really not a whole lot going on there.
Right.
So yeah, that's the standard today, Dane. We have some time lapses to show, some USGS videos and photographs, the monitoring data, and we actually do have a new map with some new volume measurements, and that gives us a little bit of rates we can talk about.
Yeah, we've been kind of waiting on those. They haven't been readily available up to this point. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting times up there. I mean, the one thing to always, we can't say enough is just how good of a viewing experience it is. I mean, you called it a lava viewing stadium or something along those lines to that effect. And it really is. I mean, people keep asking, what's the view, right? Where's the best view? And it's like, it's probably where a bunch of people aren't. And because you can see it from basically every angle around the caldera. So yeah, it's a really good time to be up there if you're interested in seeing it. Go on, and the late nights and early mornings are always better than prime time evening viewing.
Yeah, for sure, Yeah, I'm gonna put this picture bigger on a screen here so you guys can see it. It's just zoomed in from the USGS camera there. And yeah, the zone of fountaining has been persistent for a while. It's been reliable. People have been seeing it from just about every angle from around the caldera. There's a couple other spots on the crater floor that have pits with lava in them, and those might be harder to see depending on your angle. But there's really a lot to see from every direction that you try. So anything else, Dane, before we jump into it here?
I think that's it. Well, I'll jump back in a little bit later. If anybody has any questions for Phil, drop them in the chat. We'll see what we can do a little bit later when we get to Q&A. And if I might be able to answer them in the meantime, too.
Yeah, and let Dane know if you have any issues with our audio or video, and he'll be leading that discussion on the chat. So mahalo, Dane. All right, so our Hawaiian volcano summary this week. You see here the live looking at Kīlauea still erupting. I thought I would just briefly share this is a clip from the B1 camera from USGS that looks from the east back towards the west, and this is sped up for the whole last 3 weeks of the eruption here. And what you see is a combination of the lava receding towards the vent area, which is more or less in here in this image. So it first floods all the way to the bottom of the view here in the camera, and then it retreats back, and it's behind this high levee that's building on the edges of the lava lake there. So this is greatly sped up, obviously. You can see there's a little hornito here in the foreground that's getting covered, so this gives you an idea of how much the lava is filling in the crater floor and actually building it up and drowning the stuff around it. But hopefully what you can also see is the whole crater floor is actually bulging upwards from below. And it's interesting because at the beginning of this video, you see the front of the image down here in the foreground seems to drop down at first and before it actually bulges back upwards. So pretty cool. And this is a summary of what we really been seeing in Kīlauea, right? Is this building of lava up in a lava lake, spilling outwards, building a levee and causing minor changes on the surface, but also filling below that crust and bulging it upwards and filling the crater that way as well. Yeah, so that's the long and short of it. And this week, because of this bulging, we've had the first outbreak of lava on the western edge of the crater through an ooze flow. So this is the first ooze flow of this eruption. And the quick summary from Mauna Loa, just show you guys, this is the earthquakes for the last year on Mauna Loa. The earthquakes per week on a left axis here, and this was our eruption that occurred back in late November, early December. And here we are with very low earthquake counts since. So the volcano is still recovering, and there's no sign of activity on Mauna Loa. That's the long and short of it. Okay, so jumping into Kīlauea monitoring as our first menu item today. Just starting off with the USGS update here. It's not saying a whole lot different, but I would like to just once again mahalo USGS HVO for putting out all this content, text updates, the images, photographs, webcams, and all that. We're compiling it and trying to piece it together in a story for you guys, but that's the source for a lot of that information on the webcams and maintenance and all that. So mahalo once again. And here they're saying the eruption of Kīlauea volcano within the Haleʻiʻamaʻu crater continued with no significant changes observed at the summit or either rift zone. And that's been the same text update for many days here. All activity is confined to the crater. I'll highlight here the area of the active area in the eastern lake is approximately 25 acres as of January 17th. That's about a week ago. And well defined by its levee boundaries, though there are periods of frequent overflows. They've been noting the small changes in deflation and inflation at the summit on the tilt meters, and also noting SO2 emission rates, which are at 3,000 tons per day. I'll show you the graph, it'd be a little easier, and everything else is pretty standard here, so just make sure we're sourcing ourselves. And I'll show you guys the graphs that are also from the USGS, but just kind of re-displayed here. So looking at the last week, this top image is the lava depth And you see we started off down at around 382 meters and ended up at about 386. So that's a 4-meter rise in the last week. That's you're looking at somewhere in the order of, what, 15 feet-ish, maybe more. And it seemed like it came up a little slowly. There's a little bit of this interesting wiggle here, and then it seems to really climb steeply and then climb more gently here, right? So not quite clear exactly. We're not exactly sure where this laser is pointing that's measuring this depth, and that makes it a little bit tricky to decipher what exactly the signal is. We've heard suggestions from viewers that it could be fluctuations in the lava level, that it could be an overflow coming over one of these levees that temporarily changes the level within the pond. And as we'll see today, another possibility is we actually have these small floating islets that drift across the lake surface. So depending on which lake that laser is pointed at, and if it's pointing at somewhere where you might have one of these little islets float by, you could also see it affect the height measurement as well. And another thing we've seen in the past is that as the lakes change shape, sometimes the laser ends up pointing not at the actual liquid surface, but somewhere in a bank. And then the bank is also rising by the whole crater floor swelling upwards. And so it's measuring the combined effect of the lava building up and the crater floor swelling upwards. And you really got to know where the laser is pointing to make more of a story out of that. But that's the signal there. You can see the summary is it's been rising steadily here over the last week. So still climbing despite the changes in pressure and deflation inflation. That's this next graph down here, the ground tilt for the last week at the summit. And you see these drops and rises. That's a deflation inflation cycle, the deflation going down, inflation coming back up, and you see different shapes and sizes. But you see lots of these patterns back to back to back here. And that's been typical going on for many years now, during eruptive times, during non-eruptive times. It's kind of the background of the kind of churning signal of the heartbeat of the magma system down inside the volcano. But because the eruption is connected by a well-defined, seemingly fairly open conduit to the surface there, some kind of, we sometimes call it a pipe. It's probably more like a blade of some kind, right? But some connecting feature there. It's open enough that when we see these variations in ground tilt, the deflationary phase, it seems like that's when the lava level seems to drop a little bit, and you see the edges of the lava lake seem to sag and crack, and that's when bits will fall into the lake and start drifting around, and so that video is coming up. And then during the inflationary parts of the deflation-inflation events, that's when you might see a more likely chance of having overflows from the actual pond itself. So we'll see if we can try to sync these up somehow in the future, but so far, I have to just kind of tell you and point out the times, right? So you can see the largest deflation and inflation event bottoms out here on the 22nd, and there's another one on the 24th. And there's many other high peaks in between there, right? So it's kind of hard to pull it out, generalize it like that. Looking more broadly at the last month, this is the lava depth for the last month on the top here. This is pre-eruption. Eruption begins right there. So that first initial flood of lava making it much deeper, and then steadily rising. This jump upwards here was something that we've still been curious about and haven't had the answer yet, whether that's some kind of calibration. But once again, it could have been something that was, well, let's see if this goes to 385 and it was down at 376 maybe. So something that was 9 meters or 25 feet tall drifted by and then drifted out of the way. So that could have been one of those little islets possibly. But then you see we had one of these first little jumps, and here's a second one within the last week right here. So it does seem like there are these occasional step upwards, and once again we have to really know where the laser is pointed, because the last we knew this was pointed at that western lava lake, in fact, right? And so that one is not directly connected to that zone of bubbling and fountaining within the eastern lake. Still tells you a lot, but we're still not quite clear on that there. And so over the last month, I just want to emphasize, you can see this clear rising pattern, and the tilt, which you also see the deflation-inflation superimposed here, so it was kind of rising, spike for the eruption, and then has come down, is actually still tailing off very slowly. The tilt seems to be dropping on average, right? So the volcano is still getting out more lava than is coming in. It's able to expend some of that built-up energy that it's saved up here. Right, between the gap of when it was really putting out lava last in September of last year. Right? That's when it was last somewhat efficient, we'll call it. So here's earthquakes for the last month. There's our eruption start, and you can see the earthquakes have dropped off to these lower levels, which are typical of eruptive periods. And you see a lot lower than the buildup that you saw ahead of time up there. SO2 for the last month. Here we are at 3,000 tons per day, the most recent measurement on the 20th. That's in that same range of the last 3 we've had back here. That will go back to the 8th. So that seems like it really has stabilized and maybe dropping very slightly and slowly, but much more stable and at that steady level. In this range that we're at here, between 4,000 and 2,000 tons per day, that's a typical long-term eruptive values we've seen from Hale Ma'uma'u previous to 2018. Is what we saw from Pu'o'o previous to 2008 when all the gas was coming out in one spot in Kīlauea. So that's the kind of normal amount, which is high, right? It's high for people. It's high for people within downwind. It does to create fog and all of that hazard. But for the volcano, it's quote unquote normal within that long-term range. Okay, so there's for the last year the earthquakes. So you can see the buildup was fairly short-lived, and we actually had eruption happening throughout all this time. So that's all during eruption background levels, and you see we're kind of back to that here post that Mauna Loa adjustment, repressurization, and then reburst the surface and new eruption here. And likewise, there's the SO2 gas emissions. See, they were tailing off for quite a while, and then spiked back up, and now tailing back down again. So that's the pattern we expect to continue for a long time if it follows this previous year's eruption as well. GPS is still looking interesting. This is a north-south measurement across the caldera. So when this line is rising upwards, it means that the sides are getting further apart, that magma is coming in below it and spreading them, wedging them apart. And when it's getting closer together, the line goes down in that direction. And that's what we see here at the far right end of this plot over the last month or so. So this is actually following that tilt more or less, right? It seemed like it was building up, and this was a high point just prior to the eruption, during the eruption, day of the eruption. And you see it's come down and stabilized and coming down slightly on average since then. So the story, both at the shallow regions and deeper within a volcano, is consistent. That the volcano is efficiently getting out that buildup of magma. And at some point you'll see this stabilize, and it happens before the lava stops coming out, right? We've seen this both of the previous 2 eruptive phases on Kīlauea, that usually it's about a month or so in, you'll see it actually turn back to inflation and spreading and swelling, because the nozzle on top will close off and you will get less lava out than you'll actually be able to build up underground. So we'll see if that pattern repeats, but that would not be unexpected at the summit. And over on the east rift zone at Pu'o'o, we've seen no change. It's been the same pattern for the whole last year, regardless of anything else happening in the volcano elsewhere or in Mauna Loa. So that's reassuring. There's no change and no reactivation of anything down there in the near future. So here's a map of the earthquakes for the last week. Here they are in that summit region, still adjusting from that ongoing eruption. You see they're low levels, but still occurring there. South flank, similarly, low level still occurring. That's kind of always there. And then here's our Pahala cluster, still active, and looks like one of those structures that was highlighted in that paper in the Science Journal last month, maybe a couple months ago now. May have activated here to have a nice feature all consistent like that. So that's the monitoring data in Kīlauea, and I mentioned the maps, and so let me go through the sequence of maps. This was the first map that was released on January 6th, the day after the eruption began. And at that point in time, I do like to blow these up here. At that point in time, they reported 20-foot depth of lava, 6 meters or so, and lake extent, but they couldn't quite get a volume yet. They just didn't have everything dialed in. But you see here this dark red color, that's the extent of the lava. And I'll advance it to the image that was released on the 11th, 3 days later, and the last one on the 18th here. And so do it once again. Let's see if it'll go a little faster. The larger red, and you see shrunk there, and then shrunk even more. That's the pattern. So on the 11th, that was a statistics we got through January 8th. We had, at that point, 8.4 million cubic meters, 2.2 billion gallons, rising at 20 meters, 6 feet, 20 feet, 6 meters. And then the following update that we have which is actually the data point we're missing here on the 18th, gives us through the 17th that the rise is 9 meters, 30 feet, and up from 2.2 to 3.2 billion gallons, and up to 12.0 million cubic meters there. And the lake extent has been slowly dropping from 30-ish, just inching its way down. And this is about a week old by now, right? But this actually gives us a little bit of data point there. So the way we've done this in the past, if you guys haven't joined us before, we'll try to re-explain this here. We now have, this is our third eruption going on, so we actually had the first one, that's just this light blue color down in here, that was from December 2020 through May 2021. And then we had, and that ended right there. That one started off quickly, I'll highlight it here, started off quickly, and then flattened out and ended at 40 million cubic meters. We've changed the colors here. The purple one is the one that ended at the end of 2022, right? And that one got all the way up to 110 million cubic meters. So our running total might be about 150, a little upwards of that. And here we are in red, down to the very bottom. You can probably barely see it from 0 to 8.4 to 12. So let me blow it up a little bit, at least make it a little bit bigger, right? So there's now not the full year of eruption, but we'll blow it back to like about 5 months on the bottom axis here, 150 days of eruption. And there you can see that this very early phase, we went from nothing to 8.4 to 12.0 right in here. So we're starting off on a slightly less steep path here, right? Which is similar to what happened in this purple line, which is the most recent eruption. So the first return of lava in 2020 came out with a bang and then kind of fizzled out more quickly, right? And then the one that happened in September of 2021 also came out very quickly, but not as quickly as the previous one, and then kept a steadier rate for a longer time and kept going upwards for months and months and months and months and months. And so in that context, here we are in the most recent eruption. We're coming up fast as well, but we're already turning over, and who knows if we'll once again sustain a long rate at a steady level here. And so that's just our first set of data that we can pull out from that. This is the total volume that's come out, right? So in comparison here. Following the same pattern, starting fast and starting to slow down a little bit afterwards. We can do that with rates as well. So now we're looking at cubic meters per second, and the same color scheme here. And you probably can barely see in red, we essentially have 2 points. They're both right in this zone right in here. But I just want to show this zoomed out plot because we don't have this initial value reported yet for the 2023 eruption. But often the scientists who are in the field will then collect data and report this after the fact. So we knew that in the last eruptions, we've peaked at 110 and 129 cubic meters per second. So you expect it to go really high like that. The first value we have, let me zoom it in here, comes out to 32-ish cubic meters per second, and then a more recent one down at 11 to 12 cubic meters per second. So we don't have as much resolution, right? We only have 2 data points here that we have, and not as frequent as the last 2 eruptions. But you can see we're following that same overall pattern, and you'd expect it to do something like that, right? Continue to come out at a good rate here, but decreasing rates as time goes on. And that's a typical pattern there. So that's the monitoring update. And now we'll turn to some of the visuals. And I thought I'd start off with this observation from the F1 camera here. And once again, we've just taken most of the eruption here and sped it up really quick. So you can see the whole sequence. You see the top, the most obvious change in color, the great orange blob shrinking in size to the smaller lava lake up here. That's that eastern one at the far end from the camera. We also have the central pit right in here, and let me zoom that in if it'll allow me. And maybe you can see that this was the first spot that lava burst through the crater floor at the beginning of the eruption, so it made a pretty good pathway right through that crust through there, which means the pathway is still open there. But it does seem to be shrinking and closing off over time, right? You probably can see that. Still has persistently hosted lava, active lava within the pit. I'm calling this the central pit. It's probably fed from below this crust that's darker colored over here, but connected to below. And it's been shrinking in size as well, but still lifting And then over here, this is that older western pit that was originally fed by the western vent, which is down here. So the western vent there, and there, you can see this is the west vent pond are still glowing. There's still lava moving in those pathways, so you can see the glow and gas coming out. As is that whole pit itself, right? And rather than, which is really interesting to me, is that before the lava was coming out the west vent and going through a tube and coming out this way and going back under the crust in that direction, right? That was 2022. And then since the 23 reactivation, lava came back the other direction. Now it seems to come out through this hole, and it's worked its way back over this way, through here, but also through this pathway back into that southeast pit too. Really fascinating how it's reversed direction of flow there and been able to reuse those same systems. So that's the big picture here. And the other thing maybe you can notice, the whole crater floor is actually rising upwards. And it's a little bit subtle to see, and it's harder to see when it's all blue like this. At the end of the image here, you see this flash of pink coming in at the bottom zone right through here. Right? Through that zone right through there. That's the ooze up flow coming in at this western crater floor on a close margin of the volcano. So that's from the west. We'll turn and let's look at the B1 camera from the east. Let's see, here's a B1 camera. This is the one I started off with, but this is the wider angle view. And I thought I could zoom into a few areas here as well, but just to emphasize, right, let's look at the vent. Let's back up here first. So there is the vent, and there's that edge of the levee of that building lava lake. We have pointed out before this feature, this was a hornito that got flooded with lava and made a little islet at the top. The lava lake receded so that this was no longer within the boundary of the lava lake, but outside of it. But the breaches of this levee and overflows of lava within a pond, you can see have buried this feature all the way up by now. You can barely see it anymore. This is just a daytime compilation, if you hadn't noticed, if I hadn't mentioned yet. And farther over here to the right, you can see the lava levee building up and also retreating a slight bit as well. Right? You can also see the foreground lava that's actually rising and bulging. But one thing I thought was really interesting is looking at the background here. You actually can see this central island, right? This one that's been there since the very beginning of the very first eruption. Clearly is rising as well, right? Because I have it on a loop, it seems like it's bobbing up and down, but it's just resetting and starting to loop over, and it's a net rise. You can see it rising against that back crater wall there. It's really fascinating to see that really dramatically there, and I'm gonna pull it down and see if you can see this kind of axis, right? It's like looking at the hinge of a seesaw. And you can see that back edge was rising, but then the hinge is moving towards us, and eventually the whole thing, it's like a breaking wave almost, comes towards and starts pushing back towards here. So I thought that was fascinating here as well. And one last thing to point out here, it's getting to the point where this may be one of the last times we had a clear view of this back notch here, this western bay of the caldera collapse from 2018. See this, how quickly this island and the whole crater floor is rising, right? It seems like it won't be too long before we actually start having, with this rising rate, the lava be able to start flowing onto that spot, and we'll not be able to see it from this camera anymore because the bulge will actually block the view of it. Pretty fascinating there too. And likewise, over here on the northern edge, I think this one too zoomed in. Let's see if I can. Yeah, I think we'll have to look at the other camera for this. So let's move on from the B1 to the next camera, which is the S1 camera right here. And likewise, I've taken just the daytime views and sped them up so you can see this rising bulge. So that other camera we're looking at, that first one that was showing the seesaw motion, was positioned somewhere in here and looking off in this direction. So that foreground that was seesawing was somewhere right in here. You can see that a little bit happening. You can see the bulging centered around where the lava's coming up, right through here, and you actually can see the effect. Let's see if I can zoom in this area here now. Right? You can actually see it's coming and tipping upwards as well over time. It's a net inflation and rising and swelling of the thing, but with that initial drop that we saw. This was going to say in another video. If we pan this back around, there's the edge of the active lava lake here, bottom of the image. But this is that low point of the next down drop block right through here. You can clearly see this crater floor back here has been rising and it seems to be bulging up, and this is more so in the center. The very edges seem to not be rising quite as fast. You see these series of cracks that have existed around that buoyant center core of the old crater floor are still there, and we might probably see some new ones developing as well. Right now, point some of those out in a little bit here. So that's the S1 camera showing that rise, and finally the KW camera. And this one is harder to see with this view here, but let me zoom it in and point some things out there. So let me go find it right there. So okay, so it's subtle, but this part of the crater floor is doing that rising and dropping, and there's a separation and a crack that you can see. I can see the division actually goes right here and kind of through there actually, and then back this way. Right, that's the edge of what's rising faster than the stuff on the outside not rising as much yet. Right, as that wave is propagating its way underneath that crust of the surface. And if you remember, this crater is funnel shaped, right? So some of these edges are over a little block on the edge that doesn't have as much depth, and that's why it's not swelling as easily now. So that's one aspect to look at here, and there's that back wall area is right through here that we looked at in the last camera. But the most interesting thing about this animation here is this front quadrant right in here. Let's see how much bigger, probably not any more than that, but you're going to look right in here with this part of the image right in there. So what we have is that crater floor is flatter, and you can see it actually cracks, and you start to see these textures of lines through here. Those are the ooze flows that are coming in and actually wedging their way out of that margin of the western part of the edge of the crater floor against the crater wall. And as a net result, you see that crater floor is actually getting pumped upwards, lifting up and lifting up and lifting up. So if we actually are seeing episodic injection and lifting like this, and if that laser is pointed at that western lake still, then we actually could be detecting the whole lifting up of the area by this injection and ooze flows instead, potentially. But that's really fascinating to see that there for the first time, this eruption. We saw this a few months ago during that last eruption, technically. So it's something we saw around all the different crater walls. We saw them more so on the eastern side first because it was coming out from the west, and so here we have the opposite pattern coming out in the east and manifesting in the west first. But we'll be curious to see if we'll see more ooze flows elsewhere around the edge of the perimeter of this crusted lake coming up. All right, so a couple other things I mentioned here. This is the B1 camera, and what I want to point out here is, let me rewind it here. I've got it really zoomed in because there's some of these deflation events are showing up these creation of little islets, and it's hard to pick them out, and it's a little bit blurry, but let me draw it on here for you guys. From this angle, this bank right here, during a deflation event, the lava level drops and that whole bank starts to sag. And then the lava comes and floods that area, surrounds the whole thing, isolates a chunk of it. It drifts apart, starts floating, moves away, flips over and turns around, and that's what we'll try to see here. It's going to go through night and day, but there's a sagging here at the beginning. Here comes the lava filling in the area all around it. There is the lava surrounding that chunk of the levee wall right in there. There it is floating away. Some parts are rising above the surface, so it's a little easier to see as a little island. There it is spinning around, heading camera left, and it actually flipped over and broke in two there. It's harder to see from this angle, but that was it right there. So I'll play it one more time. The sagging here in the foreground, and the flood coming in first at night, and more sagging. You see the pieces of levee wall starting to detach and drift away. And by now they're fully detached and floating. The little islet starts to spin and rotate. And flips over and splits in two there. So the flips over and splits in two. I'm going to turn to the S1 camera, and likewise I've zoomed it in as well. So we're looking now. Well, let me pause it and orient you. This goes day and night, but pause. I said. So it's back in here. This is the margin we're looking at right through here. And there's another little islet you see floating in the foreground right through here. And so this is the lava coming in. Will collect this thing. It'll detach and flow out and break apart through there. So let's check this out through night and day. And I know it's blurry, but that's the resolution of the camera. There's a little floater in the foreground. There's our bank back here. Our piece is about to detach. There it goes. It's detached. You see how long it is. It's broken apart, spun around, flipped over, and emerges here as a separate piece that floats back together. So here at the end, you see there's 2 chunks of it, and a third one possibly as well that joins that first one we saw here at the beginning. So kind of hard to see that, but let's see if I can play it from here. See it detach one more time, break apart, flip over, and then bob back up there. This is the kind of things we've read about Jagger describing in the old lava lakes, Kīlauea. It's really cool to see this caught, even if it's a little bit blurry here in our current activity. And we'll revisit those old reports here probably next month after that, once we're through this outreach of USGS programs for Volcano Awareness Month. So that's a little bit on islets. I won't go any more into islets. You could track islets for a long time. Instead, we'll just focus on what we're seeing here over the last week. So this is the F1 camera for the last week. You see the ooze flows coming up here in the bottom. There they are, and pretty steady activity in that western pit. You do see this little bank that's been growing out into the lake, giving it a little bit extra shape, right? And you see when we have it at this slower speed, not a whole lot of change in the lava lake. You see the ooze flows kind of periodically popping up through here. A little bit of overflow occurring both from that pond and from the eastern lake. You see the cooling overflows there. Doesn't seem to be much correlation between a timing of the ooze flows and a timing of the overflows. Maybe because there's some distance in between there. The overflows seem to be more directly linked to the deflation-inflation pattern, maybe because they're directly next to the vent there. And when I ended this video earlier today, there was an ooze flow starting, so when we load the camera later, we'll see probably a big ooze flow just happened today over here as well. So that's the last week from the F1 camera. Turning to the S1 camera, there is our daytime view for the last week, and I did it this way so we could focus on some of the features that are occurring here. So first you can just note the islets. There's that one that's right next to the fountain. That's that one that was in the foreground of our video. And back in here is the area I have zoomed into, and you can see how tiny it is and why that's why it was so blurry back in there. But let me put this in a loop. And what I want to point out, the next thing here is the series of cracks that we have right through here, right? So I'll play it, and early on in the loop, when the animation starts, there's no crack there, at least on the surface, right? So you actually see it develop and propagate all the way through here, and actually open and widen up, right? And that times with that deflationary phase, and that's when we see that chunk break off in the northeast. So it's sagging in the northeast. We also see the sagging happening here in the southwest, right? And this whole chunk is also clearly cracking and moving. It doesn't actually detach in this case, it just kind of slumps and leans inwards there. And imagine that the next time there's a lava overflow, it's going to come in and it's going to fill in that crack and repave it all flat on the top. So if you look back at the long-term animation, you actually see these kind of cracks forming over and over and over again, and they're kind of buried by lava and then buried by lava, and so there's all kinds of cracks buried in there. And the whole thing is pretty brittle in the end, unsupported at the edge here. So that's interesting to note, how you have that source of slumping and then the islets, right? The other thing I thought was interesting is now that you're getting so many of these islets in the lake, and you can see the patterns of them drifting over time over here. You actually, when you have a cluster start to form closer together, as eventually starts happening right through here, you actually start stagnating lava flow in between them, and you start forming almost like a little bit of a clump of more gooey lava, at least if it's starting to deflate. Once the fresher stuff comes up during the inflationary phase, and it kind of floods, and it seems like everything moves and breaks apart. It's almost like it's trying to start to coagulate in a way right here, right in the middle, right? It's hardening where the flow doesn't move so easily between all those little islets. So that's really cool to see too, how on the brink, it's really just right on that knife edge of liquid and solid there, right? So pretty cool. All right, so one last one we'll loop through here for the last week is the View 1 camera, and there is a fountain night and day, and it's rising because the whole lake is actually rising. The whole surface is rising, as we described already. Fountains have been pretty persistent and steady in that one spot. Sometimes you get higher bursts, right? But it's kind of one zone with many little fountains within there. You see that this taller lava berg islet has been fairly stationary next to the vent there. That's interesting, right? It seems to be one of the tallest ones that we've seen. And actually, when a lava level drops, you can see it actually sits quite a bit higher within the pond. We're pretty foggy earlier today here. Let's play that one more time. Let's maybe get it here in high, and let me zoom into it. Let you watch the lava level drop down on it, and then come back up on it again. Right? Pretty interesting to see that pattern there. And all the other islets that we're showing you guys are off the screen, off in that direction over there. So that's the steadiness we're seeing there. No big overflows you see from the edge, but there is that crack in the foreground too, right there, that we saw it slumping of the edge there in the front, right? So here in the early part of the video, don't see the crack as easily. And let's see if we can see it form here during the daytime segment. Let's flash it a little bit there. There it is coming in here, and another segment right through there. So the minor changes in Kīlauea, that's the view on camera. The USGS has released some images in the last week here. First, we have a set of thermal images. So back to January 6th, this is showing in the brighter colors the extent of lava that was hot on the crater floor. So only this little piece in the middle was not covered in lava there, and this little piece here. Everything else got flooded in lava. You see a couple days later, the extent had shrunk down. A couple of days after that, a little bit further again. And a week afterwards, here we are at our present, more or less, state, right, 1 week ago. So zoomed out, there is that larger caldera with the area of the hardened lava lake in blue here. So once it spills out from that innermost pit, it's going to have this next zone of down-dropped areas surrounded by cliffs to fill in. It's about that large. So plenty of area for it to go. It's essentially reaching that next level of the lava stadium there. And once it does, the views are going to get just better and better and better, right? And so that's why people can, from the areas that are open in the national park, which is from here all the way around to here, is where you can get views in of the lava lake. Right, and that's usually all the upwind direction. So a little bit more zoomed in to the more recent activity. There's that fountain. It's a little bit asymmetric here, with that fountain being near that southern end of that lake and kind of flowing out. And you see the other heated areas of the other pits as well too. A couple images. This is Wahine Kapu, Steaming Bluff. Seen from the day, you see a nice cascade of steam over the caldera wall right here. The hiking trail is parking lot out there. This is one of the areas people have been coming to look at the lava lake from. Another view of the weather down here, and a layer of fog stuck down here in Kīlauea crater. The caldera is back behind the photographer here. But you see there's Kīlauea crater, lava tube parking lots up in here-ish. And interesting to see that fog collecting in the crater there. So there was also a helicopter overflight, and here's a couple images showing that lava lake active surface. There's that eastern one, central pits in here, more or less in there, and then here is that western pit. And another view from the air there once again. And I'll show you the video here, and just the last part of this sequence is a map, which we've already showed you guys, and then the video itself. So let's play the video and show you guys January 17th. From the USGS, the wide angle view, Mauna Loa's in the background behind the gas plume there in the top left. Interesting, you see a lot of gas coming out from that central zone near that central island, right? More so there than from the actual lava lake itself, but also from the edges of the lava lake all around. There is that eastern lake. Didn't quite click on that western one over there on the left, but here's a view of that cloud fume rising above the volcano there and catching the rising sunshine there. Pretty epic views. And that's their first USGS video of the day. There are some other images released here January 24th. yesterday. And we have similar views as the webcams I've showed you guys, so I'll run through them kind of quickly here. There's that perched edge of the active lava lake. They do note here, the perched levee consists of stacked crustal plates a few meters or yards tall that surround the lake. And so give you some idea of what that stuff actually is. It's like the slabs of lava from the surface of the lake. They're kind of getting carried to the edge and then kind of just get washed up on the edge, so to speak, as the lava dives back underneath the crust and circulates below that whole crust to lift it all up, right? So zooming in on a fountain, there it is. We heard in the talk that was streamed last night that typically these have been recently in the order of 6 meters, 6 yards tall or so. Something like that. That's what, 18 feet-ish, 20 feet-ish? Something like that. And a wide angle view of that lava lake, similar to that S1 camera at night. And actually, we have a release of another video, our second USGS video today. It's a time lapse from that S1 camera position, continuous throughout the day. So let's let that play here. And there's the vent, the central little islet that's close there. There's that one of those in the background, and you're getting this at a much higher. You get many more frames of action here than what we're usually showing you guys. Right? This is all one day. So it's still sped up, but not by as much as I usually speed things up by here. So you get a more realistic, we'll call it, view of what the volcano is doing on a hour-to-hour basis here. The fountaining source and the spreading out the crust, and here comes sunset and a change in the light. Oh, pretty fascinating. So this was January 20th. This video was taken there. Spectacular at night. A lot easier to see at night. That's where the nighttime views are so popular. In the day, you can see the fountain still if you're in the right spots, and you can see the red of it. But it's not the same as seeing the whole lake extent glowing red through those cracks, red and orange there. So okay, so that was the second time lapse. And I thought I'd throw this in here that was shared by at Cosme648333127. Sentinel and Landsat images processed in Sentinel Hub. So satellite views of the Kīlauea lava lake, right? And so it's cycling through here, and the overall pattern is what we've just described. You have a large extent at the beginning, and it gets smaller and smaller over time. It does look like the area wiggles a little bit. That's just probably a satellite angle. The satellite's looking down from one view or another, and it's a little bit distorted. You might have clouds in the way sometimes, so might get some extra zone of orange from clouds, such as there. Or you might actually be occasionally catching a little overflow from the lava lake. This is that larger one earlier, so yes, this might be a little overflow right through there that we saw picking up and reflection. And you are also catching up. Here's that first ooze up on that western part of the crater floor there, so that's pretty interesting to see too. But all the little wiggles are something you have to ignore. That just goes to show the kind of distortion you get when you get these satellite views, right, that we are often reliant on nowadays. So good way to illustrate that, I think. Okay, so finish up the visuals here. We'll just reload the Summit webcams and give a peek here of how things are looking at present. There's a KW camera. Lava lake's looking full, and actually, that's the reason I do this. Looks like we now have a big ooze outflow breaking out here on the northern edge of this crack. Sorry, I was just talking about this not too long ago, and here is our next ooze outflow breaking out from the northern edge of that crack towards that overflow zone to the north. Right? Here's that lowest edge of the downdrop block, so it's getting pretty close here to where it's going to fill in this zone and get closer and closer to lapping up on there. So pretty cool. Pretty cool time to catch it here when it's just glowing red to see that. Let's see some other views here. Our F1 camera is picking up the remnants of an ooze up here in the foreground, but it's not catching the stuff further west off screen here. It looks like it's not quite wide enough. But otherwise, same activity spots as before. There is a V1, same bubbling center and islet parked in the same spot. S1 looks normal as well. Can't quite see the edge of the overflow, is just over there. This is B1 looking across, and we happen to have some fume in this direction at the moment, so you don't see a lot from there. And then we're off to the wider angle ones. So really it was this. Let's see how much I can get this zoomed in for you guys. Click on it here, zoom it in more. There, that's pretty good there. Huh? Overflow, pretty close to that downdraft. All right, so if you want to go and see the viewing, International Park, viewing is awesome. As Dane started off by sharing, do check the National Park Service website for any advisories, right? They're saying in general expect delays and limited parking because it's so popular and it's so good to see it. They do have a live stream there, but they have a map of all the sites, what to expect to see from different areas, how far it is to walk, all those different details there. Turning to our map, today we're going to focus on 2 submissions to Hawaii Tracker. One was from Kīlauea Overlook over here in the north, and one from Kīlauea Overlook here in the south. And 2 different views looking in at the crater. So first, from Kathy Mule, I'm gonna guess. There is a view from Kīlauea Overlook. Bubbling fountain, glowing lava lake at night. This is still about 30 acres-ish. So takes up a good amount of that whole landscape there. But the more you can zoom into it, the more you always see the lava fountain itself actually bubbling, or little features in the crust of the cracking lava lake, or those kind of things. It's all really, really, really cool. So that was one. And then turning to Kīlauea, we have here, oh, looks like this reloaded for me. Looks like we have from Yvonne Bauer. You're watching, mahalo Yvonne. View here, Purple Mountain Majesty. Let's make this a little bit bigger. From Kīlauea, there is that eastern lake. That's the central pit right in here. Western lake, and there's Mauna Loa in the background with some snow and sunrise colors coming over it. Advance through here, and yeah, this was the one that I thought was extra stunning. You can see there's that more easily visible central pit there, and see that sunlight hitting that back crater wall right there. Overall view once again. So mahalo for those submissions. We'll just feature a couple each week here, and I'm still going to try to get one over from Kupinai at some point, but have not been able to. So if you are visiting the park, you will want to be concerned with the gas, of course. Because emissions are at a lower level, it's not been as bad island-wide. However, it's still been locally pretty foggy in some areas, especially in the volcano area and southwest here as well. And this is a forecast for the next couple of days, saying this pattern is going to continue. The easiest way to show you this is let's go to the National Park Air Quality page here. Let's let it load. And for one of the first times we actually see here on this map, we have orange, 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 and then we just have one green of all the stations on here. Kahuku over here, South Point also. This is the one that's typically orange, is down here. But you can see around the summit, at the moment, there is foggy conditions. Right? And so that's the map view. Let's come to the charts. Show you the graphs, and it's not bad everywhere all the time, but you can see here is Volcano Village had a peak around midday or so. Visitor Center had a little peak around midday or so. The campground had a little peak around midday or so, and it's dropped off ever since then. Scrolling down, Kahuku was earlier in the morning. Steam Vents was overnight and mid-morning as well. And it looks like we have a couple of stations missing there, but so you see it's that, you know, they're showing orange on the map, but it's not orange everywhere all the time. It's just something you have to be aware of, and of course follow the park guidance when you're in the area. So have signs and up for visitors there. So visiting purpleair.com, here is the map from the citizen scientist contributing to the map. And we've seen it much worse than this. Last week was a lot worse, especially in the Kona side. So you don't see as much here on the volcano side. Let's see if I can get some history to load here. Or, yep, so there we go. It's showing green and 0 at the moment. But you can see it clearly is gone into the yellow here at certain times before, right? Pahala, similarly, there it is in a green showing just 3, but Pahala is the one shown here in orange colors, so it's also come into the yellow several times as well over the last week. So VOG is still the primary hazard and still impacting communities downwind here. That's how it goes often. So earthquakes. Earthquakes are going to be quick because there's not a whole lot unusual happening. There's our island-wide pattern. Nothing in Mauna Loa. A few on Kīlauea right at the summit, and otherwise Pahala is the standard story. So there's really nothing new to say here. The largest earthquakes we've had in the last week have been in a Pahala zone. There's a 3.2, there's a 3.0, there's a 3.6, but all in these deep Pahala zone areas that's become a normal pattern down there. And just quickly on Mauna Loa. Mauna Loa shows no signs of activity from USGS here. No signs of lava, and there's basically no change in the report. So that's the source of it. There's nothing new to report. Signal-wise, the tilt is showing the daily variations. It is going up. If we look at the tilt over the last month, it actually has been going up, and then seems to have hit another gear and going up slightly faster. We weren't quite sure if this might be some longer-term cycle that might be coming around, and clearly now it's not. It's part of this longer-term reinflation of the volcano. And actually, if you look at the GPS line length across north to south on Mokuave'oveo, not what I was trying to do here. You actually can see it also has that little hitch, right, where it's coming up. Oh, let's see, my computer is struggling here. All right, where it's coming up and then hits another gear here at the end. So that's the north-south line length, and up and down length, here it is. Drop down an eruption, was coming up slowly since, and maybe it's coming up a little bit faster now, right? Looking at the scale here, this increment is 10 centimeters per hash mark. So you can see that the volcano risen back up on the order of maybe 5 centimeters or so, maybe half of that distance right there, has lifted back up. Right? And if we look at the distance across, that it's actually spread back across. Here is that eruptive jump, and then a sagging down. Right? So actually the high point here is at, call it 0.33 meters or so. We get down to 0.2 meters, right? So we maybe drop something like 13 centimeters during eruption, and actually sagging back together after a cut. So the big jump up is just getting wedged apart. Then it's sagging back together, and then that's getting wedged back apart like that. And so that's what we're seeing. And there it is, a little bit faster here at the end. But the total scale from 0.2 to maybe 0.3, so we're looking at about 10 centimeters or so, it's actually spread back apart since that initial sagging. And I thought this would be a good time to pull up the image we have of the formation prior to the 75 eruption here, the 84 eruption here, and point out similar kind of things, right? So there's distance change in centimeters on the left. Eruption happens right here, right? So you can see that within the next, let's see here, call it maybe, well, this is 5 years, so maybe this might be like a year or somewhere right in here, right? So in the next year, it seems like they have something like a 15 centimeter extension happening pretty quickly right there, right? And actually keeps going. It actually goes all the way up to, if you measure the total distance, it's going to extend to something like 40 centimeters before it's all resetting to erupt in 84 once again. After 84, it's hard to see, but the line jumps from down here to up here and back down to here, and then does this little wiggle upwards, right? So from this point down in here, that's right around 80. You can see that within those first few months, very quickly, it was close to that 10 centimeters also, right? So within the first month or two as well. And it also kept rising more and more and more and more, and eventually got all the way up to, what's that level right in there? Close to 100. So it might have not extended quite as much, maybe 20 centimeters, 25, somewhere in there, but in that first phase. And then here's our roller coaster of 2005 and then 2015. And then if we were to put that plot here and end, our current one would be looking something like this, that jump upwards and coming back down back up, something like that, right? We'll try to compile that actually to scale at some point here for you guys. But that's Mauna Loa. Here is that Mauna Loa thermal camera from the summit. See that flow is still being picked up. It's cooling down, but it's not that hot anymore. It's pretty wound down there. So that's the story for Mauna Loa. And let me put Mauna Loa on the screen here very briefly before I switch us to the last couple of things here, which is our community corner. There is another Resilience Fair this weekend in Lapa Hoihoi, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Congregational Church, hosted by Vibrant Hawaii, similar as all the other events that have occurred island-wide. And Volcano Awareness Month is ongoing for another week or so. So we're updating today because this is the empty spot in the schedule. But tomorrow at Pu'uhono Ohonaunau, there'll be a talk, I believe, by Frank Truesdell on Mauna Loa eruption insights and being prepared. Probably pretty similar to what we saw in the park last night. And then within a national park, on the last day of the month, 31st, we'll be updating Kīlauea summit changes since 2018. So that'll be the last program next week, Tuesday. We'll definitely bring that one to you guys live. We can resume our schedule next week, Dane, on Thursdays, perhaps. Yeah, that'll be February. So we'll be back to. We could go back to that February 2nd, perhaps.
Yeah, probably be good. I mean, then we can catch the volcano watch and the updates on Thursdays. Well, that was for Kīlauea, wasn't it? But we're getting dailies now, but still catch the volcano watches.
Yeah, I think that's our normal time. So we'll go back to that, seeing as that's the first open Thursday here, right, for their whole lineup. And do we have any plans for tomorrow in Kona, Dan, or is that something that's going to be too hard for us to go and cover?
I'm going to have to talk with Two Pineapples and see what the plan is for that one. I know we're all going to be busy in the next couple of days, so maybe. Right now, is all I can say is maybe we got that one. It's a firm maybe right now.
Yeah, those is a little trickier for us with we got some deadlines coming up here at the end of the month, and been a busy month as you all have followed along here.
Right.
So that's it, Dane.
So we'll see about
Mahalos.
Oh. All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, it looks like you're back.
Sorry. All right. Yeah. Hey, we have a shout out some super chats. We have a $49.99 super chat from Josh. Says thanks for another great update. Appreciate the big dono support there. Appreciate it. We also like to thank everybody that tuned in today. We really rely on viewers like you to help get the information out there, to share, like, subscribe, help with the algorithm, all of that jazz. It really does go a long way. If this type of stuff isn't seen, then everybody gets the conspiracy stuff thrown in their face, right? Because that's what the algorithm likes to push to the top, it seems. So we appreciate everybody that tuned in. We also want to thank the County of Hawaii for helping making this content possible with the Vai grant, and they've helped us to do this type of content, these live streams, but also short videos and the written content that we share on Hawaii Tracker and hawaiitracker.com. The Hawaii Tracker Facebook group is where we do most of our operations out of. It's the big group, now at 114,000 people. And, we have a ton of photographers, excellent photographers from all over, citizen scientists and everything. We like to, recognize the power of that community as well. So if you're not part of that, if you're on YouTube and you're not part of the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group, go ahead and jump over. If you don't like Facebook and then maybe check out just hawaiitracker.com and sign up there. All right. I think we can jump into some questions. How about you?
Sure. Let's see what we can discuss here.
All right. So there is a few questions, all relating to the same thing about the rate in which the lava level is rising. And the first one is how long would it take at this current rate to cover the 2018 down drop block?
I think the only answer I can possibly give is it's too early to know. Really, it's right. The thing is when you look at those eruption rates that are typical, you see that really high spike at the beginning and then it drops off and then starts stabilizing. we're still in such flux right now. It's still dropping so quickly. It's impossible to predict where it's going to stabilize to, and that really makes the projections less useful, right? We could still do them, but it'd be less useful and believable. And even when we do them like we did last year, we said, okay, but we get the down drop block by Thanksgiving if nothing else changes, and something else did change. Right, we had an intrusion below Kīlauea, Mauna Loa, so here we are, delayed all of that, and that was in the best of times trying to project things, right? When we had been steady for months, so
it's just so rough. I mean, we get asked about it overflowing from the caldera, and my answer is for that is it'll take so long to be able to do that at these current rates that the one thing we can guarantee happens is the rates change before that happens. Right, yeah. Whatever that number is, it's going to change before it ever gets close to that.
Yeah, we can't get there in a straight line from here. We're gonna have to zig and zag a bunch to get to that point, right? And the same with the down drop block. And one other thing I can say is that down drop block, it's big. It's a big area, right? And it's not flat, so it's not like it's gonna hit it and then flood it. It's kind of inclined, right? So it's gonna just kind of lap up onto it and lap onto it some more and lap onto it some more, and it depends how much the center of it actually bulges. Lava Lake could actually build a shield, right? Back in 1924. There was a lava shield over Hawaiian where that was actually the top of the shield was taller than the caldera walls, but it would overflow into the caldera, which was below the walls. So you can have variations of topography within the crater as well, right? So we're kind of assuming it's all going to rise up and flatten out, and it mostly will, but it could also bulge upwards in one area more than another, and that makes it harder to predict the volume as well. Right. So yeah, the first iteration of the plots I showed today, I mean, it's really cool to get that started because we've been doing that for a long time. But really, from 2 data points, you really can't say anything, right? Because they're kind of farther spaced out than we were used to in the last 2 eruptions, and haven't stabilized to the pattern that we know is going to be.
With 2 data points, you have a line, and you know it's a curve, basically.
Yeah, like Ken was saying, yeah, at the talk.
Yep. All right. Next question is from Matt Hacker, who asks, in that time lapse of the lava lake levee collapsing, you can see lava flowing from the collapse scarp back towards the lake. What is that? Do you know what video he's talking about? The levee collapsing?
Yeah. Let's see if I can pull that particular one. Maybe
appreciate everybody.
Yeah, mahalo, guys. Maybe it's this one, right? I showed two different ones. There's this angle and the other angle.
Yeah.
So this one, this kind of from the back angle, there it is collapsing, and it seems like the whole shelf sags all the way back to here. So because it's at a lower elevation, then when the lava comes back in an inflationary phase, it floods that low area. That's what surrounds the block and allows it to essentially start floating upwards, and then that's when it starts spinning and breaks apart and all of that. So that's the one view. I'll play the other view here. Maybe that's useful too.
Yeah, I think that was it.
So here's that back view, and the thing sags this way. Lava comes around it from both directions, more or less there. Oh no, it's kind of lapping up. There it goes. Finally detaches there and breaks apart. So we're discussing the lava flooding back towards the edge. Is that right, Dane? Is that what the question was? Yeah. So,
and then also just what is that? It's just pieces of the lava, the walls of the lava lake.
Right. Kind of glaze and coated in another layer of fresh stuff that kind of hardens and makes a shell around it. And then especially once it starts spinning and turning over, then it gets like extra layers of glaze on itself.
Yeah. I mean, this whole area is so complicated and interesting. When I was talking with Ken Hahn, the USGS scientist in charge, we were joking around like, what kind of a project it would just be to have people try and conceptualize and draw with crayons what this lava lake thing is supposed to look like inside, right? Take a cutout of it, draw it. What does it look like, conceptually?
Yeah. Yeah, you could come up with any number of things that could be valid there, right?
Police area, but it's interesting to watch for sure.
Oh, you just cut out there. Will you repeat what you just said?
Oh, how much? I was just saying about the. Oh man.
Sorry. Well, I'm zooming in on a video
Yeah.
here. See if you can
Right,
see
sorry
this thing
about
flipping
that.
around. There it is, flipping over. Really grainy, but still pretty cool to see that.
Oh, I was talking about the conceptualization of trying to envision the lava lake and trying to draw it with crayons, basically, and how difficult it would be, and how you end up with even geologists creating different pieces of art.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be really fascinating.
Yeah, well, all right. Let's see if we got any more. I think we might actually gone through the questions at this point. We are a little bit over an hour at this point, and I'm not seeing more question. So I think we can end it there. We'll try and find out what the plan is for tomorrow and the After Dark in the Park. Or no, it's the Volcano Awareness Month tomorrow. And we'll post about something like that in the community channel, or we'll announce it on Twitter or something.
Yeah.
What the plan is.
Yeah, so maybe tomorrow, for sure next week Tuesday, for sure next
Yeah.
week Thursday.
Yeah.
It'll be us back on our regular schedule. Yeah, good job leading the chat there, Dane, and mahalo for all your effort.
Appreciate it. For sure.
Going out to all these talks, yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's January's a busy month. We have all these presentations, and it's good to get some of them recorded because otherwise they don't really get seen that much. I mean, some of the presentations, like last night, jammed house, packed in there, good, audience, all that. Some of the other ones, not so much. But when they're recorded, you can enjoy them equally either way.
Yeah, we appreciate that. The recording makes it possible. Yeah, for a lot of people.
We will go live again. Oops, sorry.
You're kind of breaking up a little bit. Like then your voice will speed up, and you'll catch up to me. Then it's harder time my talking with yours when it's happening. So go ahead.
All right, well, go ahead. I'm good. I'll wrap it up there.
All right, thanks, Dane. That wrap it up too. Been a long month. Mahalo, you guys, for sticking with us. Appreciate all your support. Until next week, from HawaiiTracker.com, he's Dan DuPont. I'm Philip Ong. Aloha, everyone.